Over the past few months and weeks, we've watched history in the making. Already confronted with the catastrophe of a global pandemic that's taken millions of lives, upended our economy, and sent shockwaves through the job market, we're all now rightfully called to reckon with the deep wounds carved into our Black communities by decades of systemic racial injustice with new urgency. For me and for all of us at Lumina Foundation, pursuing racial equity and social justice is at the heart of our work. We're committed to dismantling policies and practices within the nation's system of learning after high school that perpetuate inequalities and to achieving just and fair outcomes for every student. Today and every day, we'll remain focused on that commitment to drive real, actionable solutions. We must eliminate lingering disparities in access to high-quality education and training opportunities among Black, Latino, and Native American populations. We must provide more pathways and more support to the students who need them most. And we must ensure that traditional higher education as we knew it never goes back to normal. At Lumina Foundation, we're working hard to make a difference in improving our education system so that all Americans have the chance to earn the credentials they need to find meaningful jobs. The release of our 2020 Stronger Nation data is a vital checkpoint to see where we stand as a nation and where normal has brought us so far. Not surprisingly, educational attainment remains unequal across racial and ethnic groups, and these persistent inequities harm our society. As millions of Americans look to find work again, and as new generations enter the workforce, it's never been more essential to provide all students, including adults, first-generation students, immigrants, the formerly incarcerated, people of color, and those from low-income households, with access to high-quality credentials. Part of that work is in reshaping our collective understanding of the types of credentials that hold value and opening doors to more students to pursue the pathways that are right for them. Notably, with the help of the Georgetown Center for Education in the Workforce, Lumina has taken the important step this year to include industry certifications in our Stronger Nation data set, in addition to 2- and 4-year degrees and workforce certificates, to provide a more inclusive measure of those credentials that do lead to sustainable jobs and further learning opportunities. We must ensure that our pipeline of talent is sufficiently and equitably prepared with the skills required for the jobs of tomorrow, or we risk making the same mistakes that perpetuate some of the most deeply rooted inequalities in America. We thank you for joining us today to discuss Stronger Nation and the state of post-secondary education attainment in the United States, and we hope you will join us in seeking justice, opportunity, and prosperity for all. Thank you.
Everyone deserves a fair shot, no matter who they are or how they start. We know that lower-skilled jobs paying a living wage are disappearing, and economists predict that 2/3 of all new jobs will require more than a high school education. Today, just over half adults have the training they need, whether that's a college education, a certificate program, or an industry certification. And a student's race, age, and income can all influence their likelihood of earning these valuable credentials. We need a new, inclusive vision for education after high school. Learning that is affordable, relevant, and easy to navigate, that leads to better, steadier jobs and more informed, engaged citizens. Lumina Foundation is dedicated to making this vision a reality, but we can't do it alone. Lumina brings together the worlds of work and learning, connecting educators with policymakers, nonprofits, and leaders of companies large and small. Together, we're developing solutions, investing in proven ideas, and tracking the nation's progress. But the gains have been far too slow, especially for today's students, including millions of working adults, many of whom are Black, Hispanic, and Native American. We must eliminate barriers and prepare people for future challenges. The single mom working full-time while raising a family. The military veteran traveling miles each day to get to class. The the recent immigrant navigating a new culture along with coursework. We need everyone to succeed, to make our country stronger, to build a future that fulfills the promise of a richer life and a better tomorrow.
Good afternoon and welcome everyone. Happy to have you join us for our Lumina Foundation webinar. The topic is A Stronger Nation, Counting Short-Term Industry Certifications. We're delighted to have so many of you join us today. We're actually at over 900 people who registered for this event, and so we're absolutely delighted to have you. So thank you for joining us. It's fantastic. My name is Domi Raymond. I'm a strategy director with Lumina Foundation, responsible for stakeholder engagement. And I'll serve as your moderator for today's event. Over the next 60 minutes, we'll be hearing from two presenters. And then we're gonna have a little extended question and answer beyond the 60 minutes for those of you who wanna stick around and learn more about the work. More on that in a second. I'll start by introducing our speakers. First, we have Courtney Brown. Courtney's my colleague and is our Vice President of Strategic Impact for Lumina Foundation. And she oversees our efforts in the areas of strategic planning, data, measurement, learning, and effectiveness. She also leads our work on international engagement. Next, we have Jeff Stroll. Jeff is Director of Research at Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce, where he continues his long involvement in the analysis investigating the supply and demand of education and how education enhances career opportunities for today's workforce. This work has led Jeff to focus on the role of the short-term credentials in the evolving US workplace. So welcome both Courtney and Jeff. So just to get us started, I'm going to touch on a few housekeeping matters. First, we'll talk about the agenda. So Courtney's going to kick things off for us. What she'll do is she'll give you a history of a stronger nation and also talk about Lumina's goal. She'll then talk about the evolution of a stronger nation, the current environment, short-term credentials, and the addition of certifications to what we count in a stronger nation. Next, Jeff will present on how we measure short-term credentials. Then we go back to Courtney, who will give us a quick tour of a stronger nation and conclude with key takeaways and reflections. So Courtney, Jeff, Courtney with the takeaways, and then we'll open it up to questions. And then what we want to make sure is that you understand that this is going to be a conversation between us on this. So we're encouraging everyone to use the chat box to submit your questions as Jeff and Courtney present. And then what we're asking, we're going to do this for 60 minutes, and then we'll have an extended Q&A for those of you whose schedules permit, who want to stick around and ask questions about their work or even about a stronger nation. As you use the chat box to submit your questions, we're asking and would love it if you would let us know your name, title, and organization, and then who you want the question to go to. Do you want it to go to Courtney or do you want it to go to Jeff? And the other thing is that we want you to also know that the chat is, you won't be able to view the chat, so as you're adding questions, you might not see your chat in there. We're actually monitoring the chat and we'll be sharing questions and we'll answer as many questions as we can. So we think it's pretty exciting that we actually have an extended Q&A afterwards for those of you who want to stick around if your schedule allows for you to do that. And then finally, the last housekeeping matter would be if you're using the socials, we'd welcome you using the hashtag #StrongerNation. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Courtney. Courtney, take it away.
Thanks so much, Domi. And hello, everyone. Thanks for listening in. So today is an interesting date in American history. July 1st, 1863 marks the beginning of the Battle of Gettysburg, the turning point in the Civil War, which was the beginning of the end of slavery and ultimately kept our country the United States. On July 1st, 1966, Medicare took effect. providing healthcare to older citizens for the first time, and proving that our country could enact sweeping social legislation to address longstanding inequities. This July 1st comes at another pivotal moment for our country. COVID-19 has taken the lives of over 130,000 Americans. Over 40 million Americans are unemployed. And the murder of George Floyd has led to the kind of protests and cries for social justice we haven't seen since the 1960s. In the midst of such weighty matters, the issue we're here to discuss, the progress Americans are making in attaining post-secondary attainment, may seem like a sideshow. In fact, it's never been more urgent for the health of our citizens, for the health of our economy, and for the health of our country. I believe higher education provides the foundation for a fulfilling life. But as never before, more of our citizens, especially people of color and those who have been left behind, need more education after high school to take part in our economy, to fuel our collective prosperity, bridge our divides, and strengthen our democracy. Now is the time to redouble our efforts to make higher education a national priority for all. As with the other big issues we face today, we have to rethink our approach. The good news is now we have additional tools to help in this effort. Let's start with why this moment is so urgent. For most of the 20th century, high school education was Americans' ticket into the middle class. For the 30 years following World War II, American high school graduation rates rose steadily and median family income doubled. That started changing in the mid-1970s as the knowledge-based economy began to emerge. The education and skills that propelled people into the middle class and beyond 50 years ago just don't cut it today and certainly won't tomorrow. By the beginning of this century, the United States had reached a crossroads. Ongoing advances in technology began eliminating many jobs. ATMs began dispensing cash, and robots on the factory floor began welding cars. At the same time, a world flattened by globalization meant that many American jobs that had provided good incomes could now be done more cheaply elsewhere. These forces put a much greater premium on the advanced skills that come with higher education. But in 2008, just 39% of Americans, just 4 in 10, had education beyond high school. And that rate had been stagnant for 40 years. Our global competitors saw these same trends and responded forcefully. Among the OECD countries, the percentage of citizens with a post-secondary degree or credential rose sharply, particularly for the younger populations. While the US was a longtime leader in post-secondary education, for those 25 to 34-year-olds, today we fall into 10th behind Korea, Canada, Lithuania, and the United Kingdom. This was a wake-up call for our country and for the Lumina Foundation, an independent private foundation committed to making opportunity for learning beyond high school available to all. In 2008, we set out a bold goal for the country to increase the number of Americans with post-secondary degrees or credentials to 60% by the year 2025. Then the Great Recession struck and delivered another devastating blow to low-skilled jobs. Labor economist Tony Carnevale described it as a smart bomb targeting low-skilled jobs. This graph shows what happened to jobs in the US during the Great Recession and afterwards, broken down by level of education. More than 5 million jobs for people with a high school education or less disappeared and never came back. Meanwhile, jobs requiring some learning beyond high school took a hit, but have grown steadily since. Those requiring a bachelor's degree actually went up during the recession and have exploded since. This looks like the same graph. The lines follow almost the same trajectories, even though they start about 15 years earlier than the last one. But it's not the same. This one shows the number of good jobs. But something very important is hidden in plain sight in this chart. The number of good jobs has increased and is continuing to do so, but not everyone's benefiting. Those with only a high school education are being left behind. Often, they are people of color. When it comes to those earning college degrees, the latest data show significant gaps in educational attainment between Asian Americans and whites on the one hand, and Hispanics and Blacks on the other. This has significant impact on who has access to good jobs and who does not. This growing chasm puts the American dream in jeopardy. In our knowledge economy, inequality is growing, social mobility is falling, and the consequences are increasingly dire. COVID is magnifying these trends. What's happening today has ominous echoes of the Great Recession. Of the tens of millions of jobs lost during this crisis, many are in sectors like hospitality, leisure, and retail, where lots of jobs don't require a post-secondary degree. Some say that the majority of these losses are temporary, but history tells us that some jobs will come back slowly and many won't come back at all. Clearly, those with less education face much greater economic impact than those who have a college degree. And once again, for all the pandemic's negative impact on our country, the impact is far greater on people of color. Black and Latino workers have been far more likely to have lost their jobs, while white and wealthier people are more likely to have been able to work from home and less likely to be exposed. Clearly, the US is now dealing with multiple crises. The pandemic simply brought to light a whole series of equity and access issues. This bleak picture underscores the urgent need for more of our citizens to get education after high school. The question is, what are we doing about it? When we set the goal, we also launched A Stronger Nation, which measures progress toward the goal at the national, state, county, and metro levels. The good news is we're making progress. Since Lumina began advocating its 60% goal in 2008, 44 states have established attainment goals, and the portion of Americans with post-high school education rose from 38% to 48% more recently. Our 2008 goal included all high-quality degrees and credentials. However, up until 2017, Stronger Nation only counted associate degrees and up. There were two reasons for this. First, we wanted to make sure that any credentials we count meet our definition of high quality. That is, they have transparent learning outcomes that lead to further education and employment. We know that degrees lead to further education since they are bound by credit hours. And as the previous slide showed, we know they also lead to jobs that pay significantly more over time than those for people without credentials. Second, we needed a data source we could rely on. Degrees are easy to count. The American Community Survey annually reports on attainment of associate degrees and up for the nation, states, counties, and metro areas, which can then be disaggregated by a number of demographic characteristics, including race, ethnicity, and age. But in recent years, credentials other than degrees, specifically certificates and certifications, have become more popular. They're able to better reflect learning and skills. And for many people, including working adults, this is a very good first step to better jobs and better lives. In 2017, we began including certificates in Stronger Nation. This recognized the key role they play in helping millions of Americans get a leg up in the kind of learning they need today. Certificates are awarded by post-secondary institutions, most often community colleges, and many have significant value in the job market. And because they're issued by post-secondary institutions normally, they carry college credit. They offer a pathway to further education, usually associate's degrees. Lumina worked with NORC at the University of Chicago and the Georgetown University Center on Education and the Workforce to get nationally representative data on post-secondary certificate attainment. Stronger Nation captures the national and state attainment levels of those with a certificate, but no other post-secondary credential, and have a labor market value of 15% over high school alone. Beyond certificates, we know that certifications might also potentially meet Lumina's definition of high quality. Certifications are industry-recognized credentials that are usually based on an assessment of skills and knowledge, often represent significant post-secondary learning, and have great value in the employment markets. They're also an on-ramp to opportunity. Take the field of information technology. 85% of IT professionals have at least one certification, and many have several. Another example are phlebotomists, the people who draw blood in hospitals and clinics. Demand is surging and will increase by double-digit percentages over the next few years. That's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, whether we had a recession or not. The recognition of high-quality certifications is long overdue, but we wanted to ensure that they meet our definition of high quality, that is leading to employment and further learning, before officially adding them. We have strong evidence that certifications lead to employment. We know that people with certifications and no other post-secondary credential are more likely to be employed than those without them. We know that they make higher salaries, are more likely to be promoted, and have greater job satisfaction than those without. A recent Gallup poll bears this out. It shows that 49% of U.S. workers with a high school education and a professional certification, but no other post-secondary education, are most likely to be in a good job. That was even higher than the 42% among those with bachelor's degrees, and only behind workers with a post-secondary degree. That's striking and bears repeating. About half of U.S. workers with a high school education and a professional certification, but no other post-secondary education, are most likely to be in a good job, a percentage comparable to workers with a postgraduate degree. Consider the 36 million adults in the U.S. who have stopped out of college for whatever reason without earning a degree. That's 1 in 5 adults. For them, certifications as well as certificates, from healthcare to cybersecurity to transportation, could lead to better lives. The pathways to further education for those who hold certifications had not been as clear as for those with degrees and certificates. Lumina and many of our partners have been working to build stronger pathways into and through all forms of post-secondary learning. We can now say with confidence that certifications do provide a pathway to further learning. Unlike most other credentials, certifications do require documented periodic learning resulting in recertification. We also know that many community colleges offer prior learning credit for certifications to set individuals on a pathway to a certificate or associate degrees. And in some cases, like cybersecurity, they're actually a prerequisite for other certifications and advanced learning, and they're beginning to be embedded in degree programs across the country. Already, certifications are boosting veterans' career prospects as they transition from the military to civilian life. And many universities, such as Penn State and the University of Maine, are exploring adding certifications to enhance their college degree programs. Finally, we now have a solid data source. The Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Current Population Survey, has included a question regarding the attainment of certifications. The data are available at the state level and include income to give us better data on labor market outcomes. Jeff is going to speak more about this in just a minute. For these reasons, this year we're excited to officially add certifications to our count of short-term credentials in Stronger Nation. The addition of certifications to short-term credentials gives us a more accurate count of post-secondary attainment in the United States, which now stands at 51.3%. We're really excited about these data. But before Jeff takes us through the methodology behind it, I'd like to close with a few caveats. Lumina included certificates in 2017 and is now including certifications because of the significant role they play for individuals and the workforce. For this reason, we're happy to have brought certifications into the attainment conversation. That being said, it's important that we be quite clear about what we are and what we are not doing with certifications. Certifications are immensely varied. There are thousands of different certifications active in the US labor market, with many important differences between these. Lumina is not tackling the complex nature of the certification ecosystem. There are a number of key groups and research networks, some of whom you can find on our website, who are struggling mightily to provide detailed understanding of certifications. These groups and individuals can provide more details on the complexities and nuances of certifications. Lumina Foundation is doing one simple task, putting certifications in the discussion of what should be counted when we think about our nation's growing need for its people to obtain education beyond high school. This newest release of Stronger Nation provides a measure of where the nation and state stand in regards to the share of their populations who have a certification that provides a boost to employment and earnings. Related, we also understand there will be questions regarding quality. Quality is an issue with all credentials. Things change quickly, and as a result, some credentials have a greater shelf life than others. For those with shorter shelf lives, we need to ensure that everyone has the opportunity to continue to upskill and reskill. Many certifying bodies keep up to date with their content and qualifications for certification and recertification to ensure the skills and knowledge are what are needed for current and future jobs. However, we also recognize that more research and understanding is needed, and are thankful to the many partners and other groups that are doing just this. Finally, while we're excited to now have a more accurate picture of US post-secondary attainment, these data also show us we have quite a ways to go to ensure racial equity and reach the national and state attainment goals. For all our real progress, barely half of all Americans have post-secondary education. And as I said at the outset, that simply won't cut it today. With that, I'm delighted to turn it over to Jeff for a deeper conversation on the methodology behind our certification count. Jeff?
Thank you, Court. And thank you, Domi. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. I'm sorry that I can't see you. I have to imagine you spread socially distanced across Yankee Stadium. It's great to hear that so many people have signed up. I'm going to take a little walk back through history before diving into this. About 10 or 12 years ago, there was the beginning of a multifaceted research effort to begin understanding and shine a better light on certificates and certifications. Along the way, this project was led by an interagency federal working group that, after 6 or 7 years, was able to get questions into the major labor market survey that the US Census uses, called the Current Population Survey. And they embedded a question that enables us to count how many certifications there are. So while this might not sound like a big outcome, it's very important because of the importance of certifications in making people's working lives better. Along the way, a number of groups have begun diving in more deeply to help us understand the nuances underlying certifications. Among these include WorkCred, Credential Engine, the Non-Degree Credential Research Network, and as Courtney mentioned, their website has a list of resources for those of you who are interested in diving more deeply into other work that's going on in this area and other resources that might be available. The importance of Lumina introducing these items into their attainment goal is it's hard to really share the scope of this. What happened with certificates when Lumina brought those onto the stage, all of a sudden everyone in the States was very interested in looking deeply and began to understand just how important these were for uplifting people and giving them more employment stability. The same thing is happening with certifications. Lumina is almost accidentally well-timed because as we've entered into this horrid pandemic recession, however you want to call it, I really believe that certifications are going to become very core to some of our reskilling and reemployment efforts because of their very nature of providing the employee with a very defined set of skills and the employer with validation that people have qualifying skills to get to the job. So I envision that this effort of Lumina's, which I see as setting a baseline to help the states really understand what certifications are valued in the labor market, which gets to our metric of quality. In this work with counting, since it is connected with the current population survey, we're able to look at earnings or income, if you will. And we use a labor market standard of 10% above high school as our standard of quality of returning to the worker some type of value. So that is our metric. These data, the current population survey, are publicly available, so anyone here in the audience is quite able to go and look at these data and dive deeply into them. You're able to cut these by race, by gender, by occupation, by industry, connect them ultimately to family formation. For now, what we're doing is using them to narrow in to the state level to really help provide the states with a baseline as they move forward to help use education as a device to help people and their local economies develop. So with that, I'm going to basically leave it more detailed to questions because it's very easy to dive down a bunch of methodological rabbit holes. So for now, I'll wait for questions on the rest of it. So thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. So before we close and move on to the questions, I'd like to show you where you can find the national and state attainment data. As I mentioned earlier, when Lumina set the goal in 2008, we began reporting on progress toward that goal in A Stronger Nation. A Stronger Nation provides data at the national, state, county, and metro levels. Breakdowns are available by race, ethnicity, age, and credential type through an interactive data visualization. And it can be found at strongernation.luminafoundation.org. Data can be found at the national level by credential type. And you can see here where the certifications now sit under short-term credentials, broken down by certifications and certificates. By progress toward the goal for the nation and by race ethnicity. On the national page, you can compare all states. States' educational attainment rates after high school are increasing. With the addition of certifications, 31 states and the District of Columbia now have attainment rates above 50%, and all states are above 40%. This is pretty remarkable because in 2008, no state had an attainment rate over 50%. And 32 states actually had degree attainment rates under 40%. The states with the highest educational attainment rates for adults 25 to 64 are District of Columbia, Massachusetts, Colorado, Washington, and Minnesota. States with the lowest attainment rates are Nevada, West Virginia, Arkansas, and Alabama. But you can also go deep into each state on the state pages and see their attainment rates. States with the highest rates of adults with certifications, our new addition, are Alaska, Maine, Wyoming, Montana, Indiana, and West Virginia. States with the highest rates among adults of short-term credential attainment, that is certifications and certificates combined, are Louisiana, Arizona, Kentucky, New Mexico, Oklahoma, Washington. Again, on the Stronger Nation page, you can go explore all of this. You can also explore race ethnicity data at the national and state levels and see county and metro level data for every state. There are additional pages that allow you to disaggregate the data further by subpopulations. And finally, there's even a goal exploration tool that allows you to see what it will take to reach every state goal in an equitable and timely manner. So again, I encourage you to go to strongernation.luminafoundation.org and just explore. As you can see, the nation has made significant progress in the last 10 years in both the percent of Americans with high quality credentials and the availability of better data to better understand where we are. These are promising signs of progress, and we're excited to count high-quality certifications toward the attainment goal. But there's not a moment to lose. We must use this wealth of new data and every tool in our arsenal to help people survive and thrive through the power of learning. And we must make achieving fair and just outcomes for people of color the mission of everyone involved with post-high school education. This is about a lot more than numbers. The attainment goal is based on the reality that our country faces social and economic opportunities that can best be addressed by educating more people beyond high school, especially Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Americans. This means that as a nation, we must continue to focus on approaches that make all education beyond high school more accessible and affordable for all, and that those credentials are meaningful, high quality, and enable individuals to contribute to the workforce, improve society, and provide for themselves and their families. Current economic and social conditions only make this priority more clear and more urgent, both for the short-term recovery and long-term economic success. Success is possible, but it's going to require all of us to have a focused effort. I thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions and our discussion.
Thank you so much, Courtney and Jeff. That was wonderful. Look, I've been in higher ed for like 15, 20 years, and every time I see this, it's terrific. So thank you. We are going to use the remainder of our time for the remainder of this 60 minutes to answer your questions. Want to encourage those who haven't done so yet, if you have any questions for Courtney or Jeff, go ahead and put it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. We're asking that we would love it if you would include your name, title, and organization, and also let us know who you'd like your question directed to, either Courtney or Jeff. So we already have one question. It's for Courtney, and it's for Mark Chisholm, who's the Academic Policy Director at the New Mexico Higher Education Department, the SHIO office. And Mark's question is this: are there unfulfilled job openings for people with higher levels of educational attainment? In other words, if you were to increase the percentage of students with credentials, will there be jobs for them? A lot of BA recipients end up in jobs that don't require that level of education. How would you respond to that, Courtney?
I would actually, so I have some opinions on it, but Jeff, as a labor market economist, I think would be better suited because I know at Georgetown they've done a lot of research on just this topic.
Okay, I'll take that then, Courtney. I think it's a very good question. In the U.S., we really are at a stage where we need much better counseling to help students understand what set of skills are going to align them with occupations that are in demand. And there's probably not a world where just a BA does it. We have a labor market that's built on a lot of churn. So, of course, there are people without a BA who are in your traditional barista. Yes, there's job openings because our market is based on a lot of churn. But the thing that we really need to do better is in the counseling mechanism to help tell people what jobs are available by their major when they're making their choices. So for instance, I did work in green jobs and everybody was crazy about windmill technicians. Nobody said there are just 4 windmill technicians in the area I was working in. So we really need to start thinking about using our counseling mechanism to help people align their expectations and major choices with where the labor market is when they're using their education to find a job.
Super. Thanks, Courtney and Jeff. We have a second question. This one is from Tina. She's CEO of ZWO, and she wants this question directed to Courtney. Do you think certificates or certifications could ever happen outside of community colleges or technical school routes? For example, can private industry take it upon themselves and follow the required guidelines?
Absolutely. Certifications are industry based. The standards are created by industry and agreed upon, and they're constantly re-examined. So absolutely. And there are a number of for-profit institutions who do provide certificates and certifications. At the end of the day, as long as they are high quality credentials, that they are aligned with labor market, that they are providing an outcome that is beneficial to the individual, and allowing that individual to be successful in reaching that credential, then there are many opportunities for others to take part in this education system. We just need to make sure that it actually protects the learner.
Super. We have a third question. This is open to either of you. And this individual wanted to know, how do you unduplicate? And if students obtain many without a hierarchy, how is the employment outcome attributed?
Courtney, I think I'll take this one if you don't mind. First of all, when we look at traditional degrees, all of our surveys are highest attainment. So we are always going off of highest attainment. We don't look at the interaction of multiple degrees on earnings. On certificates and certifications, we're lucky that this federal interagency working group I mentioned created a survey called the Adult Training and Education Survey that has both certificates and certifications. And through the use of that, we are able to come up with a ratio of deduplicated certifications with value. Now, we used that ratio and applied it to the state data. We were able to dive in at the regional level, and there's not that much variation. There is variation. So we do expect that work being done by the groups that we mentioned earlier will help open that up a little bit more to tell any individual state better deduplicated numbers. But we've started with a baseline from the ATAS, the Adult Training and Education Survey.
Super. Thank you for that, Jeff. Our next question is from Adam. Oh, Courtney, did you want to add to that?
That was great. Great answer.
Okay. Our next question is from Adam Van Ostdal. He's with Hannah News in Indiana. And are you going to no longer count associates or bachelor's degrees unless they result in some minimum growth in earnings or income?
That's a super question. At this point, no, that we are not considering that, because in the aggregate, they do provide a labor market premium over the course of a lifetime. And again, some of that is based on Jeff's research at Georgetown, but at this point, we believe that degrees provide better pathways to further learning and to employment opportunities over the lifetime of an individual. Jeff, I think you guys just did some recent research on this also.
Yeah, I mean, we see that the traditional degrees of associates and bachelors bring a significant premium over high school that justifies almost major by major the cost behind it. So at this point, we're not going to be doing any work doing a labor market threshold on those degrees.
The only other thing I would add is it's all about transparency to the learner. And the more we can have more data open to learners to better understand, this goes to what Jeff was talking about earlier, about what are the job prospects, what is the, how much money could I make, or what kind of things could I do with that major, I think is important. All learners should have all the information at their fingertips so they can make better informed decisions.
Super. Thank you for that, both of you. We have another question. This one is from John McLean. He's Director of Grants and Foundation Relations at Evergreen State College. And here's John's question. My institution is considering adding options for certificates and certifications that our undergraduates can earn on their way to a bachelor's degree. Non-degree seeking students could also take part in these offerings. What value do you see in this kind of model? What drawbacks? So what are the plus and minuses of blending those together?
So I'll start and then I'll send it to Jeff, if that's okay. So this is incredible. Good. Kudos to you. I think this is the future of post-secondary education, that they're going to be all kinds of credentials, and people will need certificates on top of degrees and then certifications and other places. And so I think the more information or the more opportunity you can provide to your students is incredibly valuable. I also think that learners are going to need opportunities to come into the education system, maybe get that certification, go back into the workforce, maybe then come back and work more toward their degree or another certification, go back to the workforce. There's going to be a lot more learning and earning along the lifetime of people. So I think this is the trend that's going to continue to happen. Jeff, do you want to add something to that?
Yeah, I do. I think it's a wonderful idea, and I think we have this movement of embedded certifications happening around the nation. We know that much of the training for certifications happens on the college campuses, so I think it's good that the university and colleges work to help create these. Potential downsides with this, one is checking off the box to have more degree attainment without necessarily being assured that you're providing the student with something they can use if they don't make it back into school. And I think a certification should provide somebody with that, so I'd be really working with the established certifications. The other part is flexibility of the institution. We believe that certifications are a bit more flexible than a traditional educational degree in their ability to update to changing standards in the labor market, where a more traditional degree might take longer to retool. I don't know that that's actually true, and this is why those groups I mentioned on all the research going on, they might be better able to help address whether or not the retooling time is a downside.
Very good. Excellent. Thanks. This is cool. Okay, sorry. Our next question is from Jane Oates, who's with Working Nation. And as all of us on this call, a lot of us on this call know that Jane actually led a lot of the TAC grant work when the TAC grants were happening. So her question is, will there be some identification of stackable credentials that could lead recipients to a degree?
So I'll start and say that's beyond the Stronger Nation, our counting of certifications. We definitely are working with many of our partners in considering and thinking about stackable credentials and what that means and in turning into a degree. Jeff, do you want to add to some of that from your work?
I think this really resonates with how people are thinking on the ground, because they're thinking about ways to ensure that people can get something for their time in school and also build towards progression in the labor market. So while it doesn't fit the attainment goal framework of Lumina, it certainly resonates in the workforce development community. And I think this is going to evolve on a state by state and institution by institution practice, depending on how much alignment they have with workforce and employers.
Awesome. Oh, here's another fun one. Oh, hi, Alex. This is Alex Harris. Alex is the vice president of Harold K.L. Castle Foundation in Hawaii. And, you know, a lot of us know Alex, so hi, say hi to the family. Alex's question is, historically, higher ed has enforced a bright line between credit and non-credit. What is the system and campus change leadership strategy that positions high-value certificates within a stackable degree pathway?
So you want to start, Jeff, or you want me to?
I'll let you start. I've got a few things to say, but
okay. So first of all, good morning. It's pretty early in Hawaii right now, so thank you for joining us. The non-credit credit division is one we have to figure out. There are way too many students. We figure almost half of community college enrollees are on the non-credit side. We have to figure out how they can actually have better pathways to further learning, certificates and associate degrees that exist right now. And there's some institutions that are doing that. For example, I believe Miami-Dade has a list of which certifications lead to certificates and associate degrees. I think Ivy Tech here in Indiana also has the same sort of system. And so there is some movement from the non-credit to the credit side, but there is a lot of research that we still need to understand and unpack on the non-credit side of the community colleges.
On the question about how high-value certifications fit in the hierarchy of degrees and pathways, I think one thing Courtney did not mention is by focusing only on certifications as a standalone item on education and training progression, we miss the fact that many people have certifications in hand with other degrees. And I do believe that certifications are breaking down our old linear model of post-secondary education. And in many ways, they're combining with other degrees and adding value across the entire spectrum of degrees from high school dropout all the way to PhDs. And this is a very important question. And I wouldn't look at it as in a hierarchy anymore. I would look at it as certifications playing a magnifying effect or a refreshing effect, in particular for dislocated workers. I think this is going to become really important when we talk about reemployment following when recovery starts. So, yes.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you to you both. Our next question is from Mike Bartlett. He's a senior policy analyst at National Governors Association, NGA. We all know NGA well. They do a lot of great governor's chairs initiatives. And so the question is, thanks for this helpful information. State leaders have been increasingly focused on providing better information on industry recognized credentials and connecting individuals to opportunities. What are key takeaways that state leaders, including governors, can use to improve attainment of industry recognized credentials?
Jeff, you work quite a bit with states on just this question. So
yeah. Boy, it's a tough question. One, just starting off, putting the focus on it and having it as part of the conversation to get a real feel about how your industry partners at the state level use certifications, because my sense after about 10 or 12 years working in this area is that there's an awful lot of certifications activity that's been lying beneath the surface. And so I think recognition will help people understand that they're valuable. So that kind of PR, publicity, and counseling mechanism to students will be helpful. And then working with employers to help understand about splitting the investment so that we can encourage workers, especially in this time of reemployment, to best use certifications with clear employment as an outcome. Because right now we do not want any kind of program that graduates somebody into unemployment. And I really do believe certifications give employers a clear signal of qualifying skills for workers. So I really see what you have first and then work with it is what I would say. And I just don't think we know enough. And your people in the states probably know a heck of a lot more than I do.
Yeah, I'll just add one thing to that. I mean, what we've done at Lumina is we really look at the national level. So we want to be able to compare apples to apples. Every state has much better, richer data. And so I would encourage every state to better understand your labor market, what is needed, and use the rich data that you have in your data systems there to better explore where you need to think about where your labor market is moving and what type of credentials you need to best to develop the talent for your state.
And just to follow up on that, I'm glad you said that, Courtney. For everyone, the data includes certifications holding by occupation and industry. So when you're at the state level, while I can't tell you the name of the certification someone has, I certainly can tell you occupations and industry where value is higher. So I think that you can do some selective targeting to start your efforts at the state and the national level through that mechanism.
So cool. Thank you. And just one final plug here for Mike from NGA. Our colleague, Scott Jenkins, who actually used to work at NGA, is the lead of he's our state policy director. So hoping that I know you all know each other, but just want to encourage you to connect yet again. So very good. Our next question is from Andrea. Oh, hello. Oh, okay. Just, wow, I feel like so special. You know how there's like a little sound in your ear? We just got a sound in our ear. We wanted to share with everyone that this is being recorded, and we're definitely going to share the broadcast and the link to this recording with everyone after it's over. So look for that. Thank you. Thanks, David, for that. Our next question is from Andrea Rodriguez. She's assistant director at APLU, or Association of Public and Land Grant Universities, a coalition of our urban serving institutions. And her question is to both of you, both Courtney and Jeff. Andrea would like to know, given COVID-19 and the social uprising against systemic racism, do we foresee or expect students exiting high school not to follow the linear pathway of high school to four-year college and pursue the certificate or certification route for quick and immediate job prospects?
Wow.
So, yeah, can you be a seer? Can you be a soothsayer and see like into the future of the effects of COVID-19, the murder of Mr. Floyd, and so many other things that are, impacting us in 2020? And how will that change the trajectory of students in high school?
I'm going to take a quick bite at that, but it'll be perfectly imperfect. I believe that so many people are going to have one thing on their mind for a very big reason, which is getting a job. And that the quicker that they can get a job, the more important it is going to be. And we can split the unemployed and the dislocated into three groups: those who will immediately get their jobs back, those who need short-term training, and those who need medium and long-term training. And so we really have to think about how certifications fall into that. And it's depending on the size of the state or federal investment. We really need to be conscious of this equity issue, because history tells us that we track. So families that are going to be able to sit back and afford to have their children go on to a PhD, a master's, or a BA will probably do so to try to wait things out. But not everybody can do that. And we're going to have the regretful problem of potentially tracking people into short-term degrees and the need to get a job. So we need to find a balance with that, because it is a good way to get work. So we want to guarantee pathways to the BA along the way.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, yeah, we're in a crisis right now, and the data show some of what I showed about the unemployment rates, especially for our families of color facing unemployment, and therefore don't have the resources that they were expecting or hoping to send their children or themselves to college in the fall, and now don't have those resources, or are facing other family challenges as a result of this pandemic and other things that are happening. So we understand that's taking place. I'm fearful, because the data, we keep getting data every month about who is planning to go enroll in the fall, and then it changes the next month, and then it balances out. But the data are pretty clear that of those that are not likely to return, more of those students are students of color. And so we have to pay attention to that. We cannot leave more students behind and continue to leave more students behind. If there is some way to help these students get something, and as Jeff said, on a pathway, ultimately to a degree, that's what we have to do. But there, as I said, also there isn't a moment to lose. We have to figure out how to best serve these students, both the students that we're planning on enrolling and other students in the future, to help them get a post-secondary credential that builds into another credential that builds a better life and a better future for everybody, especially our students of color in the United States.
Well said. Thank you, Courtney and Jeff, for that. Our next question comes from Parrish McDarris with Goodwill Industries in Tulsa, the Tulsa Works Career Academy Coordinator. She's the coordinator of the Academy Coordinator of Tulsa Works. Okay, this is for Courtney. What would be the primary qualitative standards that represent the common elements of the best certification programs from your research? Also, how does that compare with the college and university standards and their qualitative baseline for accepting credit for certificates or certifications?
This is a big question.
Yes.
We could spend hours in just delving into this. So, what I'll say first of all is that at Lumina, to bring certifications into this important conversation on high quality credentials, we did want to make sure that they lead to further learning. Again, they don't lead to a wall at the end for the earners, and they lead to employment opportunities. And we put on a labor market premium onto those. So those are to look at the national level and bring certifications into Stronger Nation. We wanted to make sure they met that threshold. We did not, for Stronger Nation, explore the nuances of every program and how to make that a high quality program. There is a lot of research and experts that we work with and others across the nation that are dealing with this. We have listed about a dozen of them on our website with information about what they're doing, and they can provide great answers on this. I would also recommend at Lumina, one of my colleagues, Deborah Humphreys, also is working on this very question about quality credentials, and did quite a bit of work looking at all credentials and some minimum standards or things that we want to include when we think about quality. So that resource can also be found on our website, and I would encourage you to look at that. There's some really great work and some great graphics to begin to explore what quality means when we're thinking about these short-term credentials. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Just very briefly, the one qualification I find for a certification is the fact that the good ones are rigorously test-based in their alignment to industry or occupational standards, and that would be the first marker for me of a standard that defines a good certification.
That's perfect. Thank you. So our next question, this is from Kim Fries. She's Dean at Rogue Community College. Her question is, this is the question: industry and business partners in our area see value in certificates. However, how do we get buy-in or market the value of certifications from high school faculty and counselors and those individuals with high school diplomas who are unaware of the value of certificates and certifications in the job markets? Huge proponents of certificates. Oh, she's a huge proponent of certificate and stackable short-term certifications or certificates.
Jeff, do you want to?
Oh, this is great. I just, again, we're so special. I just heard in my ear again that this, we're going to go ahead and just as a housekeeping matter, Courtney and Jeff will answer this question. That'll be our 5-minute mark. And then we'll take maybe one more question during the 60 minutes, and then we'll go into extended Q&A after that.
Courtney, if you don't mind, I'll jump right in on this one and then see what you think when I'm done. Kim, I think a real answer here is transparency, that you've got to get the information out, and I hope that your state has the reporting mechanism and the will to track the value of certifications and certificates in your labor market. And then it's always resources, right? Is how to then use that information and deliver it to the students. Do not expect a 16-year-old to be able to find this information and assemble it. I really think the counseling, this labor market information has got to get fed in there, and we've got to be transparent about the value and track these items. And many people don't do enough of it. So as you move forward, the more that you can track it, the better you'll be able to advise somebody that it's true that a elevator mechanic job will do you really well. Things like that.
Courtney, anything to add to that?
Yeah, so yes, I agree. When you said the word tracking, though, what I want to make sure is that we're not tracking individuals into these. We know that happens in high schools, and they track individuals into the college ready and the other. And so we have to be very careful not to do that. And some of that is working with the local colleges or your state colleges to ensure that there are pathways from these certifications and certificates into degrees, and ensure that this isn't a one-stop certification, but you can see this individual moving forward into degree-seeking institutions.
Very cool. Just an FYI, Rogue Community College is in Oregon. I know we do work there with our Thai work, so maybe a little bit more on that later. Our next question, and this is our final question for our 60 minutes, but after the question is answered, sit tight. We've got a little bit more information for you. This question is from Kim Clark with the Education Writers Association, EWA. This is for Jeff. Jeff, can you provide or give us some ideas of which fields? Okay, let me read it to you exactly as it is. Can he, as in you, Jeff, can he give us some ideas of which fields he does find a large number of valuable certifications?
Regretfully, our data does not let us name which certification. There's multiple thousands of certifications. If I'm right, just from memory, I think that the bulk of valuable certifications fall in health and IT. But again, the groups that Courtney has mentioned are doing work that's really diving more deeply into these. I think there's a lot of regional variation in where you'll find them to be valuable. So the short answer is no, I can't tell you. But the answers are becoming available.
Well, this is great. We're at 60 minutes, like right now, and wanted to just say this has been terrific, says she humbly. I think it was great. And I want to just go ahead and say thank you for those of you who can remain with us, who've been with us for the last hour and have to jump off. Wanted to just make sure that others know that we have another extra half hour of extended questions where you can ask Courtney and Jeff additional questions, not only questions from this webinar, but about their work as well. But if you can't stay, we just want to say thank you very much for joining us. And while you're still here, just want to plug a couple of things, right? The website, certainly Stronger Nation. I think it's really a great data visualization tool. So we want to encourage all of you to continue to use that. Up on your screen, you'll see all of our Twitter handles, or as my mom used to say, the Twitter machine, to do whatever you need to do. Encourage you to keep using that hashtag Stronger Nation. So again, thanks again for your questions. We're going to go ahead and if you want to stay for the remaining half hour, an extra half hour, don't hang up, stay with us. We're just going to go ahead and shift and continue to ask questions. So for those of you who have to jump off, on behalf of Courtney and Jeff, thank you so much for joining our webinar. And for the rest of you who are going to stay during extended Q&A, more to come. Great. With that, we can go ahead and continue with some questions. If Courtney and Jeff, if you're ready, we can keep it going, which will be great. So our next question then is, what about other skills and training like coding schools or coding programs earned through extension programs? How common are these and how do they compare to certifications?
I'll jump on that one, Courtney. Right now, I don't think we have any really good data to make any kind of comparisons. There's nothing consistent and nothing I know of that gives us a national lay of the land. And part of the work with Lumina is to ensure that we have publicly available data that states can utilize to help understand these problems. And so I would point you to the website that Courtney mentioned and the various groups there, because they are diving into questions like these.
Super. Courtney, anything you want to add to that, or we can go to the next question?
Fine to go.
Okay, great. Our next question is from Jermaine Ford, VP of Workforce at South Louisiana Community College. Will there be, and this is the question, will there ever be Pell for short-term certificate programs in high demand programs? Ooh, I want to know the answer to that.
Well, as far as I understand, this is Jeff. As far as I understand, this is operating on the Hill. I have no crystal ball about what is going to come out of the Hill, but I'm certainly my understanding is that they are thinking about it. So we'll see where that leads.
That's super. We're going to keep going through these questions, y'all, because they're coming, which is yay. I love it. This is from Greg Schuchman. He's Assistant VP at University of Central Florida and a commissioner with Education Commission of the States, ECS. Oh, first, fantastic presentation. Thank you very much, Greg, excuse me. I live in Maryland and just looked at our numbers in Stronger Nation. He's using the tool. Fantastic. We love it. There is almost a 50% point difference between our highest attainment county and lowest attainment county. The counties with the lowest attainment the county with the lowest and the lowest attainment counties. Okay, the counties with the lowest attainment are largely concentrated in our rural areas. Beyond addressing the digital divide, what can be done? So when people use the Stronger Nation tool and they see this thing, how does it galvanize them to action? Any thoughts on that, Courtney?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I would say that's the first reason for these data, are to make you aware of what's going on. So the county data to me is one of those that is always shocking, because it's not just Maryland, it's many states where there are enormous disparities between usually the wealthiest and the most educated, and then the poorest, the most rural, and the less educated counties. And so using this information in your state to better understand where there may be education deserts, where there may be technology issues, where there may be other issues of access and affordability, I think is really essential. So my recommendation is to look at these data, really understand what's at play there and how you can address it and help these students better succeed.
And this is Jeff. I'd like to encourage you to send an email for an after questions discussion, because there's some interesting stuff you can do looking at the labor demand by area and et cetera, but I think it's a bit too detailed for this, but I'm happy to have a follow-up on some ideas about how to dive into your question and maybe get towards an answer. It won't produce an answer, but get closer.
That's super. So we'll make sure, Greg, that you and Jeff connect. And I'm pretty sure if we don't have your email address, Greg, which I think we do, we can certainly get it from Brian Sponsler since you're part of ECS. So we'll go ahead and do that. Our next question is from Daniel McInerney. He's professor at Utah State University. I ask this as a strong supporter, not a skeptic. Please clarify the meaning of high quality credentials. When speaking of certifications, the variables tied to high quality involve employment rates, income, good jobs, and pathways, and accountability. But there was no comment on the content of instruction, the substance of educational materials, the qualification of instructors, and the nature of testing and evaluation. Will you please comment?
So I'll start. First of all, hi, Dan. It's great to hear from you. It's been a couple years, so thank you. I know you're a big supporter. So I would first start out and say our definition of high quality credentials are transparent learning outcomes that lead to further learning and and employment opportunities. And so that's the standard that we use when we're looking at the national level. We don't bring in hours of instruction or anything like that. That is really at the program level, which is a really important concept, especially when we think about tuning and the degree qualifications profile and many of the things that you have been involved in. Those are important components. For this, our high quality credential is really about ensuring that there are pathways to further learning and to ensure that there are employment opportunities for the individual that has that credential. Jeff, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, just one thing. Only on certifications, we know that the gold standard certification has a highly rigorous test for obtaining the certification. Now, people, again, on the website Courtney mentioned, can tell you more about how many certifications providers meet those high rigorous IRT standards on those tests. but the good ones are pretty damn good.
Yeah, and the other thing, Dan, I would just say, look into, again, I mentioned that quality task force that Lumina pulled together under Deborah Humphreys last year. And so there's some information also there looking deeper into quality of all types of credentials.
That's super. Oh, hey, Sean Tierney. Sean Tierney, he's Associate Commissioner at the Indiana Commission of Higher Education. Hi, Sean. And this question is for Jeff, because obviously you could just probably walk down the street and talk to us, Courtney. This is for Jeff. Thank you very much for this. Do you have a sense for how often these numbers will be updated or how often the survey will be administered?
Well, the current population survey is done monthly, and I do believe that the certifications question is part of the core demographic. So it's actually asked on a monthly basis. We actually aggregated on a 12-month, also to catch March to pick up earnings last year. I think the problem is at the state level that you really need to pool your data. So it will be being updated, but once you start pooling, you lose some of the cyclical patterns. So you'd have to take a look. And if you're fortunate with tons of certifications in your state, then the data would be updated a lot because you'd have enough sample. But for the average state, it's going to be updated on a rolling basis because of that need to pool.
Great. Courtney, anything to add to that? You're good? Our next question is from Randall Brumfield. He's Deputy Commissioner for Strategic Planning and Student Success at Louisiana Board of Regents. Say hi to Kim Hunter-Reid for us. For many states, attainment and earnings data from proprietary and for-profit institutions have been a challenge to collect and report. To what extent does Lumina Foundation or Georgetown University, CEW, see non-academic credentials from proprietary and for-profit institutions contributing towards attainment goals?
Jeff.
Well, we don't report these data by who did the provision. I think you could crack this open through use of iPads, but it's not something that we've done. And when it comes to certifications, because they're not officially provided by a Title IV institution and often a private, some type of private provider, they're even harder to figure out who's providing them. So on the traditional degrees and certificates, you could get to this answer. We just have not done it.
The only thing I would add to that is that Credential Engine is working on all the providers of all kinds of different credentials and collecting information from them to better understand what are the credentials they provide. And so as that, it's already growing quite a bit, but as that continues to grow, those types of credential providing organizations will be in there too. It's all about transparency of data. We just need more and better data. And you're exactly right. Some of this lives in a black box, and that's not fair to the learner or the employer.
True. Randall, if you want access to Credential Engine, is credential.engine.org, and you can access that information there. Our next question is, and this is to anyone, it doesn't say to either Courtney or Jeff, how do we build those relationships with industry businesses to promote these certifications to current high school students? Meaning, not just looking for entry-level workers. Also, how do we eliminate the negative reputation of manufacturing of only being repetitious factory work?
Yeah, wow. This is a very hard question, not because of its nature, but because I believe the answer lies in the specificity of the relationship between the employers in your local area and the education provider. So you need proof of the pudding is in the eating. The student is not stupid. You got to be able to show them that there is in fact a job that is high skilled, computer assisted manufacturing and pays well and becomes worthwhile. And from the employer, I think the employer, needs to, publicize the fact that they're looking for a certification and people need to demonstrate that they're getting on a good career pathway through the use of a certification. Our data on average says it's happening, But when you get down to that local area, you need some really good storytelling, some really good proof of pudding examples. You know, my brother Bob, he did this thing and he got there. Like my brother-in-law's a crane operator and had to get a crane operator certification. And I know he got a big change in his income because of it. So I've got a personal example. People need those.
I would also say that this is an issue of communication within a community. So K-12 has to work with industry and your local colleges and your nonprofits. One of the things Lumina has done over the last few years is create talent hubs. And these are really community-focused collaborations, because most of these, you know, K-12 lives here, college lives here, industry lives here. And instead, how do you build the dialogues? And so you are aware of what the labor market is requiring. You're aware of what students are able to do and how to provide opportunity for them. And students are aware of the opportunities that exist in their communities. And so building more community partnerships like talent hubs, I think is a way to begin to demonstrate the value both in the community and outside of the community.
This is great. We have another question. This one is from Juliana Capuano. She's with AmeriCorps Vista. She's a volunteer with them, and she's in the greater Cleveland area. Let's see, Greater Cleveland Neighborhood Centers Association. Here's Juliana's question. How do you see K-12 implementing career education to prepare students for post-secondary attainment?
I will claim no expertise in this area. So Courtney, if you have it, go for it.
So I will say that Lumina really focuses on post-high school learning. And so I don't claim any expertise here. I think, again, it's about partnerships and communicating. And you know, it's really about all of us building more transparent data and information. If those in K-12 have more access to transparent data on jobs, outcomes, earning potential, success rates for students that look like them, I think that's really important so that they can make better informed decisions. So more students can be successful, and we don't continue to build that 36 million with some college no degree. So more information, more opportunities for people to make good decisions. Will be my one answer here.
And I would add to that most states have a higher education office that we call the State Higher Education Office. And within each of those states, you'll find that is where you see a lot of K-12 and higher ed collaboration happening. For Ohio, it's the Ohio Department of Higher Education. And if you reached out to that organization, Juliana, I'm pretty certain that they'll be able to share with you any type of K-16 collaborations that they're having, or K-16 through the workforce that'll be going on in the state, and certainly would be impacting the Cleveland area. So wanted to mention that. Our next question is from Janice Palmer. She's VP of Public Policy and Government Affairs. At Helios Foundation. Say hi to Braulio Colon in Phoenix, Arizona. Question is, with COVID-19, reskilling is front and center with varying degrees of quality. How do we ensure that this could augment and not sidetrack our certificates and certification work?
This is an extremely difficult question that's going to take an immense amount of political will to track and evaluate and put. We've got to avoid snake oil salesmen. And once you put money on the stump, people are going to be there, and not all of them are going to be honest. And so each state and local community has got to put some rigorous evaluation standards, some rigorous outcome standard, and ensure that at least public funding is going to things that do what they say they're going to do. So it's a tough one, but it's going to, tough one.
Very good. Our next question is from Dana Bryson, Senior Vice President of Social Impact at Study, I believe it is. Question is, given the disproportionately negative effect on people of color that the COVID-19 has created in the workforce marketplace, in the workforce market, what differences do you see in the demand and changing landscapes for certificates, certifications, and credentials?
Boy. Regretfully, we don't know enough about how it's changing in the current pandemic to get any kind of predictive answers from what's currently going on. I think we have this hard balance from our past experiences. The positive is that certificates and certifications and other short-term credentials get people work ready quickly. The downside is this worry that's come up several times about tracking. So as we make investments, I think we really have to be conscious, and Lumina is doing a great job putting this on the table. I have to commend them, of equity, equity, equity. Do these things, are they being applied equitably to help uplift all people in a fashion? But we just need to be careful. It could get away from us.
Yeah, for sure. Courtney, you're good with that, right?
Yes.
Excellent. Here's our next question. And Adrina, please forgive me for mispronouncing your name. I'm going to try and get this right. Adrina Tarantonius. I don't think I did that right. Director of Workforce and Career Development from Hawkeye in Pasadena, California. Here's the question. How do we help design certificate programs that fulfill related training and instruction, RTI, for apprenticeships that both meet employer needs and are credit bearing? Should we do customized training versus certificated training, which are credit bearing? That was a mouthful, so.
This is Jeff. I would really say that this question requires the experts that are kind of listed, that Courtney has mentioned, because this one's really deep in the very, very practice-oriented development area, and I don't know enough about it.
Okay. Very good. Our next question is from Angela Smith. She's Director of Institutional Effectiveness at Indiana University, Kokomo. Here's the question. For those of us in higher education institutions, what colleges and universities are thinking about credentialing in innovative ways, and what do their models look like?
Wow. The only institution that I've worked with directly is the North Carolina Community College System that is really working on the embedded certifications model. But my understanding, that is making the curriculum align directly with the requirements of the exam. So I think that's a really good model that I think is happening, nationally. But I really don't know more than just that one example.
Yeah, I would say there are a number of examples. Many of the TACT grants addressed embedding certifications and rethinking their business models, and how do you consider these short-term credentials and part of the curriculum. So there are a number of different models that are out there. And so again, probably good for further conversations. And I would say that, again, I'll keep referring back to that list of partners, that those are the organizations that are really steeped into this work and looking at really good models that are addressing this. And some of the work I know that New America is doing and others are looking at that type of credentials embedded within colleges and rethinking business models to include all of them.
Super. We have a question from John at RTI International. John would like to know, can you say a little more about the 10% threshold you use to identify high value certifications? What outcomes factor into that designation?
John, to dive into this more, we probably would want to go offline, but the very brief answer is, looking at empirical human capital work, we see that the returns to 1 year of post-secondary education is a bit under 10%, depending on if you get a degree or some type of award, probably around 5 to 7%. So we upped it so that the counting that we're doing is what we call conservative, so that we're not inadvertently counting too many certifications. So that is the underlying reason for the 10%. And that's based on sort of average length of time to get a certification and a whole bunch of other pieces like that. So that's the short answer to what is there's a deeper answer behind that.
Super. Our next question is from Kaya Sesi, Reentry Program Manager at OIC of America, a national workforce development nonprofit network. Kaya's question is regarding if there are any quality short-term credentialing programs or systems that are available and accessible online, given how much of our work will remain virtual for the foreseeable future. Which emerging credentials or certification pathways lend themselves best to this setting, specifically for disconnected young adults currently struggling to buy into ServSafe, etc.?
Well, this is Jeff. I think this is a question that really goes to people working in the practitioner space. I don't personally have an answer on particular programs. I do see them, of course, moving online because much of the certifications work can be done under a self-study environment. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say I've seen a lot more over the last few months come online, and then some of the industries are rethinking how they're providing those so they can keep their employees or students on track. But I just want to use the same caution about snake oil salesmen that Jeff brought up earlier, and that we have to be careful to protect the learner.
For sure, particularly disconnected young adults, but all learners. For certain. Our next question is from John Dorer, and this is for Jeff. Any work being done on the birth and deaths of certificates and certifications to better labor market dynamism? I never get this word right, y'all. You know that. So dynamism. Okay, there it is.
Well, first I want to say hello, John. Everybody who knows John, he's forgotten more about labor market dynamics than I've ever learned. So great to hear from you, John. No, regretfully not enough. Hopefully, I'm going to guess over the next 2 years or so, we'll be able to look at this. But I think the fact that certifications can be updated and commonly are, Roy Swift also had been talking at one time about a certificate with an expiration date, which I also thought was a good thing that would help reflect changing labor market needs and requirements, right? And so to get to that, make labor market dynamics a little more efficient. I think they can play a really good role, and that's one reason I'm very happy that Lumina has put these on the front page so we can talk about these in much more detail.
Super. Which actually is a good next question. Your Roy Swift comment actually ties a bit to Marjorie Golsa's question. What is the shelf life of certifications? Will people have to keep getting new ones?
Yeah, there's a lot of variation, so I can't really tell you what the average is, and there's various ways to get re-up your certification. So I'm guessing, without any proof, it's around 5 years. And so at that point, you do need to get re-upped. I'm talking about the gold standard certification. But I think it also reflects just how quickly a particular labor market is changing. So I can imagine programming or Microsoft certification probably changes a little more quickly than some other fields that are a little more stable.
Great. Our next question, oh my goodness, is from Abby Smith with Team Pennsylvania, who's the Director of Education and Workforce Development. Hi, Abby. Abby and I used to work together at the Department of Education in Pennsylvania. Hope the twin boys are good. Okay. So here's Abby's question. Thanks, everyone, for the great presentation. My question is regarding employer signaling. When it comes to industry valued certification, how much can we look to job postings or data sources such as Burning Glass to better understand the demand? And how might that understanding play into state policy decision making?
I cannot speak for how reliable and how often certifications are listed in the job postings that Burning Glass uses. Depending on how reliable those data are, I think it would be a good way, because I think the employer is a revealed preference. What they put in the ad probably means something, but we do know job ads tend to omit implicit information. So if you know a particular certification must be had in a field, there's no way it doesn't make sense to waste word space to say you need something you know you need, because if you're in this field, you have one, right? So I think we need to dive more deeply into that. It could become very important, but I don't have enough to say which way to go.
Okay, great. We're quickly approaching 3:30, the 5-minute mark. Sharing that as a housekeeping note. We do have another question. I think we can get that in before we close out. This is from Chad Addy, District CTE Director with South Bend Community School Corporation. Chad's question is this: Perkins 5 has an increased focus on younger, more diverse learners. What pre-apprenticeship and early career pathways can Lumina point to as exemplary down to grade 5 or Perkins 5?
I'll leave that to you, Courtney.
So I would say this is not my area of expertise, Perkins, nor K-12. And so at this point, I would say perhaps, again, some of our partners or the organizations that are listed may have better information on this, but I would not provide a good response that would be useful for you, unfortunately.
There is an organization that Kate Blasverin, who is with the CTE network. Is that where Kate is? In any event, what we can do is, Chad, I'll follow up with you and I'll connect you with Kate. She is an expert in CTE and is actually in the national office and actually does quite a bit of work with states and districts. So happy to do that. And actually, as it happens, Chad is our final question for the day. I just want to say this was a wonderful discussion. I hope everyone enjoyed it. For those who are already peeled off, but certainly we really appreciate those of you who hung in for the entire 90 minutes. And we're so grateful that so many of you were able to do that. I want to go ahead and give a shout out and a hooray to both Courtney Brown and to Jeff Stroll for today's presentation. Any final thoughts or comments, Courtney or Jeff, before I close us out?
Jeff?
Well, I hope that the whole idea of certifications invigorates people to keep asking more and deeper questions, because we're trying to really still figure out what we don't know. And there's an awful lot we don't know.
So I would just to conclude by saying at Lumina, we're really excited to bring certifications into the conversation. We do believe that they are an important credential, both to help many millions more Americans get a leg up as a first step into further learning and education. And we believe that they provide tremendous value to the labor market and to the individual. That being said, we have a lot more work to do in the U.S. if we're going to increase our talent to meet our economic and societal demands. We are barely over 50% right now. And so right now, especially in the middle of a pandemic and multiple crises, let's use this crisis as an opportunity to really excel and help more Americans, especially those who have been left behind, and those Black, Hispanic, and Native American Indians who deserve so much more. And let's try to propel many more Americans to get post-secondary credentials. So I'll just conclude by saying, go to Stronger Nation, play around with it. I promise you can't break it. Use the data to both explore your community and your state. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, and Jeff. And thank you both, Courtney and Jeff, again. Just want to encourage everyone, again, Courtney just talked about a Stronger Nation. If you have any further questions for us, want you to know all the questions that we didn't get to, we got to as many as we could. But if you want to email us or use the Twitter handles, if you have any follow-up questions, you're certainly welcome to do that. And the Stronger Nation hashtag is still going to be up and running. So we just want to say thank you so much for joining us. We have all the information you need in terms of all of the socials. Also have our Director of Media Strategy, the fabulous Tracy Chen. Her email address is there. So you're welcome to go ahead and email any follow-up questions you have directly to Tracy. She's going to triage all of them, and then we'll figure out what we need to do with that. So this concludes our webinar on A Stronger Nation. We're so delighted that you all were a part of this conversation with us. We will be sending out the link. We did record this, and you will get it if you register for that. So thanks so much, and we hope you have a wonderful, lovely, and safe July 4th weekend. Thanks, everyone, for joining us. Bye now.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.